Alright everyone, welcome back to my AZ-801 series. Moving on today, starting our subject on migrating workloads and servers. And I have a really important question for you. Do you need another tool to manage your Windows servers? Because Server Manager isn't good enough, PowerShell isn't good enough, any of the other tools to manage servers aren't good enough. Microsoft decided you needed another one. So, today we are going to be looking at Windows Admin Center. This is not really a tool that I plan on using, not really a tool that I think is all that useful. We're going to get into some of its shortcomings at the end of the video. But part of the exam objectives is using Windows Admin Center. So we're going to get into it today. I am going to go over the installation setup, some of the basics of it. It might be something you use. I have read a little bit online that says some people are very happy with it. They think it's a great tool, and I do think it has a place. I'm just not sure what that place is. So to go further into the video today, we're going to talk specifically about not the storage migration services. That's the next video. We're going to talk about Windows Admin Center. So we're going to go over the installation configuration. I'm going to discuss some of the two different install methods of how you're deploying it, being, setting up on your client versus setting up on a server and acting as a gateway. We're going to go over some of the setup in the console, how you connect to different servers, how you share those connections, basically how you configure it more from an administrative central console sort of way. And then we're going to look a little bit at the Azure integration portion of it, which I think has a lot of potential to be really great. Though, like everything, it's still a little flaky. And then we are going to actually cut over to the Azure Portal itself and look at how you can use the Windows Admin Center interface within Azure, which is a separate thing, but related because you'll see that the look and feel of the console in Azure is the same as you have when running it on a server. So that's what we'll talk about today. Let's cut over to our lab desktop here. And I've got my management server up and I am ready to install Windows Admin Center. Let me minimize here. I've already pulled up the page for this, and if you're wondering how to get here, it's really easy. You Google Windows Admin Center in any search engine and you get right here. So this does not come automatically installed on the server. And if you're wondering what Windows Admin Center is, it essentially appears to be Microsoft's next iteration of your server manager. And I left this up intentionally because the prompt for Windows Admin Center pops up everywhere you go on a new server. It pops up when you open the failover cluster manager. It pops up when you launch the server and open server manager. If you haven't checked this box of don't show this message again, Microsoft appears to be pushing really hard the Windows Admin Center. And I think the reason why is because they're investing a bunch of time into this tool. They've already got a tool that does basically the same thing in server manager, and they want you to migrate because they think it's really neat. I just left that box up so you can see it. But yeah, it isn't a tool that comes with Windows Server. So you do have to plan around how you're going to install and deploy it. With that being said, let's go here. We'll press the download button and we'll get started on here. This install is very simple. The installer is very lightweight. It does have a number of requirements in order to actually work once it's installed. But we'll walk through this. Okay. So accept the terms. Yep. This is asking whether or not you want to send Microsoft the basic data or additional data to help them in development. And this option, I'm going to use Microsoft Updates because when you think about, or when you realize all the different components of Windows Admin Center, and it does run a lot, there's a lot of built-in extensions and extensibility in the platform. It will be running regular updates, and if Microsoft is aggressive about developing this, it's going to be best to stay on the front end of that because there are already a number of bugs that they're probably already sorting through. So I would recommend Microsoft Update to make sure it's up to date. Otherwise, you can update yourself. With that being said, this window right here doesn't actually give you a configuration option, but I'm going to pause here and talk a little bit about how you're going to deploy it because it's going to be one of two ways. Now, let's cut over to the whiteboard really quick, and I will show I'll kind of write out an illustration because that'll be easier to see. All right. There are 3 4, I guess, methods or ways you can set up Windows Admin Center. And they're all basically the same when it comes to installation, but it's a mode of operation that Microsoft wants you to understand. It's all over the documentation, so I thought it'd be good to talk about it. The first way you can use Windows Admin Center, you have your workstation, right? This is where you work from. If you want, you can install Windows Admin Center directly on your workstation. Multiple colors, really nice. This will essentially act as, it'd be the same as installing RSAT tools or Server Manager, I guess, directly on your desktop, and then using that rather than connecting direct RDPing into servers or SSHing into servers. You use the Windows Admin Center console on your desktop to connect with and manage the servers from that desktop. Now, we're going to get into the requirements of Windows Admin Center a little bit later, but it does require essentially that your WinRM ports are available from your workstation, which won't always be the case. Now, the other way you could do this is, if you've got a server, you can install it as what Microsoft is calling a Windows Admin Center gateway. Now, there's no difference between installing it on your desktop and installing it on a server, except for the fact that if you install it on the server, Microsoft is assuming connections are going to be coming into your server. So it's acting as a gateway, like an RDS gateway, essentially, a connection point for multiple clients. So you can install it here. Now, if you install it here, it's assumed that multiple clients then are going to be connecting. I'm really enjoying switching between my marker colors, really comes down to, are going to be connecting to your gateway server, and then your gateway server on the back end is then used to connect with and manage other servers in your data center on the back end. In this case, this is your gateway setup right here. You install the console here. User connects from the desktops to the console. It's hosted on a server. It's a web application based, so you connect with HTTPS connections. Pretty straightforward to let through a firewall if your data center and servers have other ports blocked and you don't have direct access. And then the console on the server connects with and manages other servers on the back end. This is the gateway install. The other thing you can do is you can do what we're doing in our lab, install it on the server and use it on the server, and then it's not really acting as a gateway device. It's acting essentially the same as installing a local console, but it does require you first to RDP into the server and use it there. That's kind of the third way. Now, the last way that you can use Windows Admin Center, the last configuration that's available, what did I do with my black marker? There it is rather than installing it on a single server, you can install Windows Admin Center in a clustered role. So you add multiple servers and you use your clustered server configuration to host the application. So if one goes down, it fails over to the other server. Now it's highly available Windows Admin Center. Those are the 4 ways that Microsoft has documented how you can install and run Windows Admin Center. Really, there's nothing new or revolutionary about this. It's just making a web application available in different configurations depending on how you want to do it. But it's in the documentation, so we wanted to go over it. Now, let's cut back over to our server and finish the installation here. If I click Next, a couple options here that are important. Windows Admin Center modifying machines trusted host sessions. This is, I believe, something to do with if you're using NetBIOS for DNS discovery, not domain. I believe this allows it to set the machine that's hosting the Windows Admin Center as a trusted host. I don't know that much about it. Not really that important. Use WinRM over HTTPS only. This goes into some of the network requirements for Windows Admin Center. Specifically, the fact that when you're connecting to and managing servers on the back end, it uses WinRM. Some people don't like to open the ports for WinRM, or some people want to protect that. So they require, this will, rather than using WinRM ports, it uses WinRM over 443, the HTTPS ports. Now, if I check this box and I don't have a PKI environment set up, meaning I don't have certificates deployed to all of my servers, I can't use HTTPS because that's a prerequisite. So don't check this box if you don't have PKI. Otherwise, you can check it if you want to kind of change the network traffic, not to allow WinRM. And then finally, here's the automatic update to Windows Admin Center, depending on whether or not using Microsoft Updates or not. Next, you'll notice I checked that box. I have a lab environment. I don't have PKI deployed, though we are going to configure the console to use certificates, so I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'll walk through that in a second. Finally, here you're setting what ports you're going to use for the actual web application that you're going to be connecting to, the Windows Admin Center web application. 443 is the default. I'm going to leave that there. And then you have options for your certificate. Now, by default, it wants you to generate your own self-signed SSL certificate. I am going to use a self-signed certificate, but I'm going to generate it myself because I want to look like it's trusted. So emulate that we're in a full environment. So I am going to use an SSL certificate. I don't have one installed, but I made myself a really quick script to do this. So let me cut back over to my ISE console here, and I have to copy my script. 1 second. I'm doing this only because I am really anal about HTTPS. I like it to work, and I like it to look like it's working. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating one certificate that's going to be used as the signing certificate. This is going to emulate me having a root CA in my environment. That really, this is only going to be trusted on this workstation. I am probably going to make a video on certificate services eventually, because I don't think many people understand it, and it's really, really good to have the basics down in your head, even if it's just the basics without managing the whole environment. So we'll get into that later. Anyways, I'm generating my root CA cert that this workstation is going to trust, and then from that root CA cert, I'm going to also generate a self-signed certificate for my Windows Admin Center application, which is going to be wac.dzab.local. dzab.local is my test domain, and WAC is going to be applications. That's going to emulate like if I was having actual other administrators connect to the Windows Admin Center from the workstations, that would be the domain that they would use. So I'm just going to run this really quick. It should run, assuming I've got my scripting chops up to snuff. Cool. We've got our signing certificate. We generated our new certificate, and now if I go to certlm.msc, I should be able to see in my personal store I have, okay, so this is my signing cert, and this is going to be the cert I'm going to use for the application. So wac.dzab.local, and I'm going to copy the thumbprint here, go back here, and paste it in. So this is saying I want to use that cert for wac.dzab.local for this console. Now this box is, this reminds me of a NetScaler's function because we use NetScaler for all of our web-based applications, but essentially this is saying if someone is in their browser and they just type in wac.dzab.local in regular HTTP, it will automatically redirect that connection to be HTTPS instead of HTTP, which is, why wouldn't you, right? And there we go. Let's finish the install. I'm going to go ahead and close this and this, and we are off and running. This doesn't take very long. Really, this is a pretty lightweight application. All right, we're finished. Go ahead and click finish there. And now to access that site, like I said, I'm setting this up to run as if it was a gateway, right? I'm emulating the fact that it's a gateway service that other people are going to be connecting to. They're going to use their browser to connect, but I specified a different domain, right? The cert is wac.dzab.local. That's how I want user to connect. So the first thing I have to do is create a DNS entry for that. So I'm going to open DNS. And create a new record. It's going to be CNAME because it's hosted on this server, and I don't want to have to manage IP addresses in multiple places. The alias is going to be WAC, and there's my domain that we're going to connect to for the Windows Admin Center, and that is an alias of this server, which is management P1. Looks like I already had it. This was a lab environment I was running yesterday, and I went to destroy it, and it didn't destroy. So I ended up paying for VMs overnight last night, which I'm not super happy about. Speaking of which, I am going to be coming up with a new video soon where I'm going to walk through how I've been setting up my lab environment for the AZ-801 with the intention of showing you all how to run your own lab environments. Because for most of these videos, it costs me less than a cup of coffee from Starbucks to run all of the servers I need for a lab for each topic. It's very inexpensive and it's very accessible. So I'm hoping by making a video about that, it can encourage you, if you're trying to learn this stuff, to run these labs in your own environment and go through the steps yourself, because the best way to learn is firsthand experience. Anyways, there's my DNS record. So we're back at our console. Now this is the server it's installed in, but pretend that this is going to be your desktop and you're connecting to this as a management service. So I'm going to go to my Windows Admin Center domain, and the first thing I have to do is sign in. Now, a couple things about the sign in here. I'm using domain credentials, which is the default method, and I don't know why it prompts me twice, but this is a good demonstration of what a lot of people have expressed as frustrations for the Windows Admin Center, and we're probably going to see this a couple more times throughout this Migrate Workloads series of videos, and that's going to be the fact that Windows Admin Center prompts you repeatedly for sign-ins. I have not been able to get the pass-through authentication to work, meaning it's supposed to be able to use the authentication from your local session that you're logged in as. I can't get that working. I haven't really dug into it that far. I don't really care to, but it's supposed to work out of the box, and it doesn't. So I prompted for sign-ins quite a bit. And yeah, I was reading a Reddit thread about whether this is actually useful, and a lot of people said they get driven nuts by the constant sign-in prompts. So while we're talking about sign-ins, you're going to notice as this opens, you'll see up in this top right corner, we've got a whole bunch of extensions I start installing. Extensions in Windows Admin Center operate the same way that extensions in Azure operate. It's essentially you install the extension and it increases the available features that the Windows Admin Center can perform. We're going to walk through that a little bit, and you'll see a prompt for successfully updating your extensions. It comes with a couple by default. You also have the ability to install optional extensions, and lost my train of thought here. And you also have the ability to customize where you're installing extensions from, which, while we're talking about that, let's look at that first. So first go to Settings up in the top right, and I click on Extensions down here, and you can see by default there's a whole bunch of installed extensions that come with the console. These are the things that you can do out of the box. This is also what you saw that it was updating when I first launched the console. It updates at every version release of this, but there's also a handful of extensions that might be updated. And this is using the NuGet package manager in the back end, so it can automatically detect and install updated extensions as needed. You also have this available extensions tab here, which lists the additional features that you can install. Now, one thing I wanted to do is demonstrate how you can manage Active Directory with this, because that's a pretty common use case for IT administrators, right? You want your help desk users to be able to reset passwords, look up users, stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Active Directory extension here, and oh, there's my install button right here. And that will install, and while that's going, it's going to reload the console, kind of annoying. And I'm also going to install DNS, because why not? So that's as simple as it is to add extensions, right? The extensions that are listed here as available are all coming from the what's called a feed, right? This is what your package manager is connecting to list what's available for you to install. If I go to feeds right here, I can see that my default feed is provided by Microsoft. It's the SME extension catalog feed. This is where all of these extensions are coming from. This is also the feed that it's checking into to see if there's updates to installed extensions for it to load. I have the ability here to add custom feeds. I did a really quick Google search, and by really quick I mean like 2 or 3 minutes. I didn't really look that hard. I didn't find any custom feeds, but I'm willing to bet there's probably some out there, and there might be people that are working on them, but I didn't find any really quickly, so I didn't really look that hard. But you do have the ability to add feeds, which potentially then gives you access to other extensions that other people have published and are maintaining. But for now, there's only the one, and that's fine. There's quite a bit here. especially for the basic stuff that we're doing. So that's extensions in a nutshell. That's really important for as a concept of managing Windows Admin Center, because extensions are increasing the usability of your Windows Admin Center for other people that might be using it. So especially if you're running it for a lot of IT staff, you're going to want to manage a bunch of extensions. Now, let's circle back and look at the sign-in issue, what we have been talking about. By default, it's using authentication from the server to the domain. So you can use your domain user accounts to sign into this, and those permissions then will be allowed to access it, but you also have the ability to customize the permissions. Now, before we get into that a little bit, let's first look at the other sign-in options. You do have the ability to sign in. Hold on. Access is what I want to go to. You do have the ability to connect Windows Admin Center with Entra and then prompt people to use their Entra credentials instead to sign into Windows Admin Center. The reason you might want to do this, which is a really good reason, especially if you're planning to run this as a gateway that other people are connecting to, is this right here. If it's connected to Entra and it's enabled, you have the ability to use multi-factor authentication using whatever multi-factor authentication is configured within Azure. But that requires you to register it first with Entra. And that's literally, you check that box and hit register. Now, oh, it looks like that's not even required. So the difference with Entra then is you're using conditional access. You can use the MFA policies for that. If I do this, it says I need a group that provides smart card authentication. Sure. Doing that in a domain environment is possible, but I haven't done it. So the other thing you can do here is you can add permissions groups for Windows Admin Center that link to roles in the console here. So right now the default is built-in users have read access, gateway users. The administrators of the domain, so built-in administrators group has gateway administrators, which allows them to do everything like connect to server, use RDP, use PowerShell, use all of those sorts of tools. Users by default have read access. They can come in, they can look at the monitoring status of servers, they can't really do anything else. So this is your RBAC control model that's built into this. It's pretty limited, all things considered. I don't think that there are too many roles. Yeah, there's just two. There's administrators and users, and then you can have a smart card security group, which is, as it states, the requirement for multi-factor, or a gateway user security group, which is literally just linking it to the security group in the domain. Now, let's do this, but we're in the console here. Let's configure it first, the group that we need for this, in the console, because I added the AED extension, right? So, to get out of settings, I'm going to go to all connections, and you'll notice here, I have one connection. And the connection listed is to the server that this is installed on right now, the management.p1 or management p1 server. But if I want to make a list of servers available to anybody who might be signing into the console here, I can do that. The way you do it, go back to settings, go to shared connections down in the bottom left here, and add the servers you want to do connections. Now, you can do Windows PCs, so workstations, servers, clusters, or Azure VMs to manage. I'm going to add servers, and I'm going to search Active Directory. And the nice thing, wildcard search is supported. So I'm going to do star-p1 because I want to add all of my production servers to manage, right? Really, p1 is a suffix I use for everything. So these servers don't exist, ironically enough. That might come back to bite me later in the presentation, but whatever. I've got 3 servers here that I know are running. Actually, I think I did deploy another one of these. Let me check really quick. Back SMS. Yeah. I did deploy that one, so that one exists. Add. Cool. Now I have a list of shared connections, and if I go back to my connections screen, I see all of the shared connections listed in the console. Now, these shared connections will be available to any user that signs into this instance of Windows Admin Center. The second you connect to a server, it moves from shared into personal. That's why this one is listed here. It's also marked as the gateway, but I want to connect to ADP1. Now, here's the first instance of credential prompts outside of signing into the console. Like I said, I wasn't able to get Windows integrated authentication working, so I have to always enter my username and passwords, but I'm going to check this box to say use these credentials for all connections. Actually, I'm not going to do this, specifically because I want you to demonstrate some of the frustration to the console. I guess that's a good illustration to say that I could check that box and it should use those everywhere, but it's funny to me how many times it prompts you and at weird spots. So we're going to leave it unchecked. Okay, here's ADP1, and I added the Active Directory extension. So if I look down here on the left-hand side, I should be able to find Active Directory right on the top. And you do have the ability to open it in a new window versus in this console pane here. But now I have access to my Active Directory domain. I can search things here, or I can browse. And you'll notice this is this view much more closely resembles ADAC versus ADUC. So if you're one of the purists like me that came up forever with Active Directory and ADAC feels super unnatural to you, this console interface is going to feel unnatural. It's also kind of a lightweight view. It doesn't let you do everything. I wasn't able to get into like some of the advanced attributes of users. But our use case here, we were going to set up a group so we can provide RBAC access outside of just the built-in groups, right? So I'm going to go to groups. I want to do RBAC because it's going to be an RBAC group, and let's create one. RBAC, Windows Admin Center, and let's do administrators. That way we can stop using the built-in administrators group, because let's be honest, you shouldn't have users in that group anyways. It's going to be domain local group. Well, do global. And same account name. What a weird thing to prompt for a group. I'm willing to bet it's not required. It should set to the same thing. Now, there we go. Create. Set it created, but there's no refresh button. So let's go back here. And if it did not create this group in this folder, I'm going to be really annoyed, but I'm not going to be surprised. So let's go to, is it? Let's see what happened to this. RBAC. It exists. Where does it exist? So, this is not something that I was expecting for this presentation, but I'm not really surprised. Weird issue number 1 for Windows Admin Center. I was in the folder for RBAC. I created the group in my groups, RBAC OU, right? I was here. I hit the create button here. It did not create it here. It created it in my users container, which is the default places that users are created. That is obnoxious to me. Anyways, let's move this to the correct place. My right-click menu also doesn't work because we're in a web console, and it doesn't have context-aware updating. So let's properties. Can I move this from here? I can add members. I cannot move it. Let's see. Can I just drag? I can't drag and drop it either. Whatever, right? I'm not going to move it. This is a lab, but our group exists. Okay. Let's go back to settings and set this up for RBAC. We were in the access menu. I'm going to add. I also cannot search for the group name, apparently. Apparently my group doesn't exist. Individual users can't be added. Let's go look at this menu. Error. RBAC Windows Admin Center administrators did not exist in domain. Just to be safe. Let's try. I might not be naming this correctly or typing it correctly, but what an obnoxious interface. There. So I had to add the domain prefix. I cannot search for this. I have to type it in manually. But I assigned my gateway administrator's role to the group. A little bit of microcosm of what I really expected from this demonstration. Windows Admin Center is not super fleshed out. I also am skeptical this is ever going to be a product you ever want to use with very broad sense in a domain. maybe for medium-sized businesses. But there we go. So RBAC permissions here. I've added a group. I can drop users in here, and it will grant them the gateway administrator's role in the RBAC console, which allows them to do things like manage, run PowerShell commands, connect via RDP, stuff like that. So I already kind of looked at it with the 80 thing, but let's go back to connections and let's see what we can do with some of these servers. Let's go to our, let's go back to the domain controller. You'll see right here, the first thing that comes up is a nice little monitoring pane for getting some metric data right from the server, some numbers about CPU, RAM, utilization, stuff like that. It's got a lot of information here. I can enable disk metrics if I want to. I have access to all of these different extensions that were available from the extensions menu. If I click on DNS, I have no idea what this interface looks like. I'm just curious. I got DNS. I have an interface. Not a very good one, but an interface. So I can view things there. More importantly, I can remote desktop into this PC. I believe this is going to be an HTML5 based RDP connection. Will you let me connect? Let's try checking that box. I have to check the box first. Because, God forbid we get prompted for a certificate. We need to automatically accept it. But, pretty cool here. At least I have RDP access. Like I said, HTML5 based. I feel like this is a technology Microsoft's done quite a bit to improve upon. So, this is pretty neat. Not going to lie. I don't mind this feature. So, I'm going to disconnect for that. The other thing I have access to is PowerShell. So, this is running a PowerShell instance directly on this VM. I do have to authenticate again. And like I said, this is running WinRM. I wouldn't be surprised because this is PowerShell. I can't click the submit button. You saw, I tried. That didn't work. No, you have to hit enter in the console. Because why would you give us a button that works? Issue number 2 we found in the console. Actually, that's 3. Second is the remote desktop one. Okay, but I have PowerShell. I can run get data user. So I have PowerShell access to this. Now, something to think about on the back end too. I do believe I also have access to files and file sharing. This is going to navigate, which closes the PowerShell window. That's a good prompt. You do have access to manage shares and files, which is useful, right? This is essentially like a beefed up version of the computer manager management interface. I was reading documentation and it talked a little bit about CRED SSP. Now, if you remember if you've seen the protected users video or the video about protected users authentication policies, authentication silos, that we talked about how CRED SSP is not really a trusted authentication protocol. Hold on. Because I don't know exactly why. I don't really care to dig into the details of that stuff too closely, other than to know that there's something about the way it passes credentials that's inherently insecure. It does talk about in the documentation for Windows Admin Center, there are some instances where this console will use CRED SSP. And the demonstration or the example they gave was if you are managing one server, like I'm managing ADP1 already. I'm connected from my management server, management P1, to ADP1. And it says if you are managing a server and you're connecting from that server to another server, so let's say I'm managing P1, managing ADP1, connecting back to P1, which is my other lab VM that's running right here. In that instance, we're doing a connection of a connection. It will use CRED SSP if you're doing, I think, SMB traffic to initiate that connection. So there are instances where you might end up using CRED SSP for using this. They just called that out as something to be aware of. So if you have that blocked, they do say that they have some sort of more secure version of it. I'll pull up and link the documentation for Windows Admin Center that I'm referencing in the video description if you care to know. But that also leads to the other thing, which is there are a number of port requirements for Windows Admin Center to work. So let's switch over to the browser and pull up port requirements. Cam Edge, hold on. Alright, we got our browser pulled up, and let's do Windows Admin Center network requirements. It starts off by talking about there are a number of web URLs that are required to make this work. And these web URLs are because the Windows Admin Center installation needs to be able to talk out to its package manager to install extensions. It also needs to be able to check in for updates. So there are some settings you can configure here to adjust how much it talks out to the internet, whether you want full access just to Azure, stuff like that. But you'll notice it also has a number of Azure resources that it connects to, like storage accounts and things. Now, if I go to, is it prepare my environment? Because the ports weren't listed there. FAQ. I could have sworn there was network requirements. Gateway, browser. All right. I think this is what I was thinking about for the port requirements. It's under Prepare My Environment, and it talks about needing the Windows Management Framework version 5.1 or higher. Now, that's installed by default on Windows servers, but it's also worth noting that this is using the WinRM ports. So you're going to have to look up what the WinRM ports. I don't see this actually listed here. I did think I found it. I thought I found a page where it had the ports listed that you need to allow, but I'm not seeing that. The other thing is on the servers themselves, you have to enable remote management. So if it's not enabled by default, or if you have it blocked, you do have to have that enabled. Now, just to be thorough, let's say here's a documentation on how to configure WinRM for HTTPS, like it has linked in that setup. Well, we talked about how there's a checkbox to use WinRM for HTTPS. That does require certificates, right? Otherwise, there is this WinRM quick config command that you can run on a server, which will enable WinRM by default if it's not. But based on my experience, most of the time this is enabled. Now, there is by default, if you're using the Windows Firewall will not allow WinRM ports in from another server if that server is originating, or if that connection is originating from another subnet. So I have my subnet set, my server subnet is 10.0.1, my AD subnet is 10.0.0. In order to get this to work, I actually had to go and disable Windows Firewall in my AD server. Now, I could just specifically look for a rule to allow WinRM ports, but as I've done more and more of these labs, I got more and more frustrated managing firewall rules, so I just went and turned it off, which is why I was able to connect to and manage my AD server. But WinRM is required, is the long and short of it. There are also SMB ports that might be required if you're doing file share access, but you're the gist of what I'm getting to is you're going to have to do some management of firewalls if you have something that's blocking ports by default, and it's going to be from your gateway server that you need to manage that, not from the originating connections. With all that being said, the last piece of the Windows Admin Center that I wanted to look through is connecting to Azure, because the Azure integration piece I think has a lot of potential to increase usability. So let's cut back over to our console here, and we'll go back into settings, and you already saw it a little bit. To use Azure services in Windows Admin Center, your gateway has to be registered. So I have the ability to come in here and register the gateway in Azure. Now, if you remember back, I have a series of videos on Entra authentication. I believe that was early on in the AZ-801 series. It's one of my older videos. But in order to access Azure or to access information from Entra ID, you do need an application registration, because that's what this Windows Admin Center is going to use as its authentication method to get access to your Entra information. So registering this with Azure gives you a couple of things. One, it allows you to use your Entra credentials to sign into Windows Admin Center, which is useful. Two, it allows you to use the console to deploy directly to things like Azure File Storage, which is a storage account configured for SMB that acts as like a file share, or even to create VMs. Our next video that we're going to get into is on storage migration services, and that is cutting over shares from your one file server to another and replacing it. Essentially an easy mechanism, an automated mechanism for cutting over file shares. The ability, that part of that process is you have the ability, rather than cutting over to a new existing server, you can cut over and create a new Azure VM, the same thing. Now, that's a preview to the next video about storage migration services. There's some caveats with that too. But the first step of everything is you need to integrate your console with Azure. So I'm going to click this button. I'm going to press register. And this is a little goofy how it does it. So you select your cloud. By default, Azure Global is normal. You copy this, and then you're going to prompt you for browser sign-in. And this is going to give you, you need to specify your Azure credentials. So yes, I'm trying to sign into Windows Admin Center. So I can close this window now. It's a weird sign-in mechanism. Now, when you sign in like that, using your Azure credentials, it automatically looks up your tenant ID, and then you have the ability to either create a new application. Remember, the application is how Windows Admin Center authenticates into your Entra environment to read your user group data. Also, it's what you can use to grant permissions in Azure. In this case, it does a user impersonation, meaning it uses the application, and then whatever user is signed into Windows Admin Center, it will use that user's permissions in Azure to create resources. But I already have an existing one because I did this once already when I needed to create new. That's easy enough. I'm going to go look up my Entra application ID really quick and copy and paste that in here. 1 second. Bam. I don't need that semicolon. An application. Okay, so that's the application ID. Let's try object ID. Oh, wait. There was a space character. Cool. Connected, sign in, and we're now registered. So that's as easy as it is to authenticate with or register with Azure. Now if I go in, this is the Azure account it's using. That's the impersonation it will use. I can switch that account if I want. Otherwise, I now have the ability to check this box, and it will change the identity provider from my domain sign-in to my Entra things. I don't want to do that because this is a lab domain, and my Entra tenant is my tenant. So I'm not going to leave that checked. But that's as easy as it is. Once I've registered with Azure, I can just go and enable that. So probably a good thing to do if you're planning on using this in big productions or in like an actual organization and business, because Entra authentication is really good, and then you get all of the security controls that come with conditional access and that sort of thing. I'm jumping really quick here to interrupt the video that I had started recording because I realized after I'd wrapped the recording from the other day that I never actually showed the Azure Portal for Windows Admin Center like I expected to, because there's two components that are related to Azure for Windows Admin Center. There's the integration piece we already went over, and then there's the ability to access Windows Admin Center from the portal in Azure directly on a VM to manage that VM essentially with the same interface that Windows Admin Center works. So, ironically, I actually recorded this interruption video once already and realized it broke anything and learned some things. So this is good that I have to re-record this because apparently I forgot to hit record the first time. But right here, I am in the management screen for my Management P1 server. This is the server that has the Windows Admin Center console installed and configured on it. Now, if I want to manage this server using Windows Admin Center in the Azure Portal, all I have to do is go under this Connect section over here, Windows Admin Center, right here, and then click this, and it takes me to a page where I can then manage, use the Windows Admin Center to manage it, right? Now, you do it to specify inbound ports. This is grayed out. I actually just clicked past this the first time. You have to create an NSG to allow this port. Because I already have an NSG allowing me to RDP into this server, it's grayed out because I can't edit that. So I have to go do this manually. I'll do it in a second in a later video. And then I can check this to open outbound ports. Now, this install button, what this will do is this will install an extension on the virtual machine to called the Admin Center extension. What it does in the back end that I just learned that is good that I'm re-recording this is this actually installs Windows Admin Center on your virtual machine. So like we did earlier where you had to go download the extension and install it, this does that on the back end using the extension. Now where this is tricky and the lesson I just learned is if you already have Windows Admin Center installed and configured as a gateway on the server, what it does is replaces that installation. I just messed up everything I had configured, which means I also just messed up my storage migration service video, which is next to this, because I went and installed this to record this video and it broke the existing installation. And when I went to remove this add-on so I could re-record this video, it uninstalled all the Windows Admin Center from the server completely, meaning I lost all of the configuration database that comes with it. So, fun fact. Installing and using this extension installs Windows Admin Center on your VM and will overwrite and conflict with any existing installation installed. So if you're using it as a gateway server, beware. But to get this started, all I have to do is click here, install here, and it will go to install the VM extension. That takes a while. Now, because I already recorded this once, I have my next video, so I'll pick up on that little section next. Alright, our extension is installed, and it's that little pop-up there said I must be a member of the Windows Admin Center role in order to manage that. Let me click back here. Must be part of the Windows Admin Center administrator login role to connect. So, I can click here and go to role segments. I did not even realize this was a role. So, let's do add. Ironically, I am an owner on this subscription, meaning I should have rights to everything in Azure, but this seems to be different. So this role must be like one of the Key Vault roles where it's not automatically applied with some of the more global administrator scopes, which makes sense because you're going to be managing OS configurations within it, not necessarily Azure related configurations. Grant myself this role. Next. Alright, I am now a Windows Admin Center Administrator Login Role Holder. And let's go back and see if it applied right away. There might be a delay here. Nope. Cool. Oh, there you go. So let me hang out here for a second and keep clicking refresh until this works. There we go. And let's connect. Failed to connect. Let's try to use the private IP instead of the public IP. Public IP wouldn't work. I have an NSG that only allows RDP traffic in. That's it. So I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work from a private IP address perspective. I did set it to allow... Oh, you know what it is? It's using this 6516 port to go inbound. I have an NSG. I'm sure that's why it didn't allow me to check the box to allow the rules by default, because I already have an NSG applied. I can't create one and apply it. So I'm going to take this port number, 6516, and I'm going to go to my NSG and I'm going to add an allow rule. Here we go. source, let's see, I've already got my public IP address here, so oh, you know, I can do the my IP address thing. And destination custom 6516. I hope that was the right port. Let's just double check. Going to fail. Just trying to get that port information really quick. 6516. Yep. Okay. So allow from my IP address destination 6516 and allow WAC. Cool. Now let's try it again. There we go. It just took a second. I forget. NSGs have a slight delay. So I waited, clicked the button, and now we are launching Windows Admin Center. Now, like I said, this is all in the Azure Portal. We've already been through this, but you'll notice this interface is basically the same thing. This gives me my overview page. This will be the same page that pops up in the console if I click on a server to manage it. And I have, over on the left-hand side, all of the same extensions that I had locally. Actually, I'm going to walk that back. I don't have all the extensions. I only have a couple. Like we installed the Active Directory extension, we installed the DNS extension. You can remember that from that earlier in the video. Now, if I go to settings, do I have the ability to add that? I have SMB file shares, environment variables, power configuration. Yeah. So this does look like, rather than giving you the full console experience, it does look like it gives you the administrative access into the Admin Center using the Azure Portal to do all the same management you can do in the console. So if you like Admin Center and you're familiar with it and you want to use that in the Azure Portal, here you go. This is how you'd configure it. Now, I don't have any clarifying details on the firewall rules required to allow access. I imagine if it requires that sort of port opened to all of these servers, this is not a good solution. But there's got to be another way to use private IP addresses instead of public ones. I'm just not going to go into it. So I'll look up some information and I will link that below so that you can do it yourself if you're interested in using this product. Otherwise, this is the last little snippet I wanted to record to make sure it's included in the video for you guys because I referenced it in the beginning. You have Windows Admin Center in the Azure Portal if you'd like to do that. That's about it. Like I said, my storage migration service video is coming up next. That's going to look at how we can actually create a VM using this console, and it'll take a closer look at the storage migration service itself, which is part of the exam objectives. As you can see, as we've gone through this video, I'll cut over here a little bit. There's obviously a couple of problems with this. You didn't really see a good demonstration of the multiple sign-in prompts, but I think as we get into the storage migration service video, you definitely will see that come up more. We did see a couple of flunky weird issues, right? Your Active Directory interface, if you're using Active Directory stuff, it's that ADAC based thing that doesn't really work really well and doesn't have a right-click menu, so it doesn't have any sort of right-click context. When I created a group, it created it in the user's container rather than the OU that I already had open when I hit create. We saw weird things, not with DNS, with RDP. I wouldn't let me connect unless I checked the box to automatically accept the certificate. That's not a major thing. And with PowerShell, I entered the password. I tried clicking the submit button. Submit button didn't work, but if I hit enter in the console, it worked. There's just weird things like that that make this feel like a very rushed, unfinished product that really would make me hesitant to deploy it in a business or an organization right now. But it does have features. It is working. It could be used as a replacement for like RDP man if you're using a whole bunch of RDP connections, because you do have that shared connections list. You do have access to run PowerShell commands via the console. You have a limited RBAC. So if you wanted to give people a view of like server metrics and information, but didn't want to give them access to like PowerShell or RDP, you really could use this console just as like a method for them to access it that way. So there's some use cases. It could be useful. It also has its drawbacks, right? But I think it's a product that Microsoft's actively working on, especially with all the prompts it has to use it all the time. The other piece that I didn't really get into in this video is there's a lot of potential to use it for failover clusters and Hyper-V hosts. That's a big part of their advertisement and their pushing from the documentation. You can see it's a big initiative, and I'm not going to stand up another failover cluster in my Azure tenant if I can avoid it, because they're a nightmare. But yeah, that's it, what it's intended for. So maybe there's more features there that I haven't really explored that might make it a more viable product if you do a lot of that in your environment. You don't know. Either way, that wraps the video. The next one's coming up is storage migration services. We'll be spending more time in the Windows Admin Center, so hope to see you for that one. And if not, have a good one. Let me know if there's anything, any questions you have, or any other video content you'd like me to work on here. Otherwise, always appreciate a like and subscribe. Thanks.